A new analysis of President Donald Trump's budget proposal is casting fresh doubt on his economic plans. President Trump ran for office on a pro-business platform to cut taxes and regulations in an effort to boost a slow-moving economy. But the Congressional Budget Office says his first budget is overly optimistic. And according to their projections, the administration will fall short of promises of 3% economic growth and would fail to balance the budget over 10 years. Dani Burger is a reporter for Bloomberg. She joins me now. Okay, Dani, so these CBO estimates, they say it would be 1.9%. The White House was hoping for 3%.
Right.
What's going on here?
Right, yeah. So if we look at the difference in numbers, quite a big contrast. So that number you cited leaves us about 3.4 trillion off between the yeah, that's huge. So again, the difference here is growth. So the Trump administration's assuming we're going to have a 3% GDP growth, which is quite large. So to put that in context, since the recession, since we started to recover from that, we've had anywhere from 1 to 2%. We have not reached 3% growth. And that's very hard to do, especially this late into the game, because each year the bar keeps getting set higher. To get to 3% is really difficult. So the CBO is saying, look, we can't get to your 16 billion surplus you're predicting in the next 10 years. Instead, they see a 720 billion deficit, and that all has to do with that growth number. Not to mention that there really isn't much in Trump's tax plan, and the CBO even said as much, that they're having a hard time really assessing the economic impact because he just really didn't give them. I mean, we remember when they gave out that tax plan, it was basically just bullet points. So CBO says here, look, we don't have enough to really gauge what the economic growth would be.
We're also seeing, Dani, that U.S. consumer confidence was down this month. What's playing into that? Why is that happening?
Right. So these numbers are always really fascinating to me because they're very partisan. So if you look at before the election, Democrats were quite optimistic, Republicans not optimistic. In fact, Trump's approval rating as a candidate was pretty well correlated to how negative Republicans felt about the economy. Trump gets elected, that quickly switches. Republicans are very optimistic. Democrats become pessimistic about the economy, not as much as Republicans were, but still not as optimistic. Now, we recently got a Michigan Consumer Confidence report on Friday, and it's shown that Republicans have vastly become more pessimistic. Independents also have become more pessimistic. And that in itself, independents especially, is a good gauge for how people are feeling.
Independents, Michigan?
Exactly.
Okay.
So independent voters, essentially.
Oh, sorry.
Yes, yes. So I mean, it shows that in their answers, they weren't necessarily saying that they don't like Trump's proposed policies. It all came down to the gridlock in Washington, and 17% cited the health care bill as their #1 concern when it comes to financial matters. And that's the biggest concern out of any of the possible on this survey. So yes, this gridlock, this inability to get health care passed, really weighing on consumer confidence.
I want to play a bite that sort of struck me yesterday. The CEO of JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon, came forward yesterday talking about gridlock in Washington. I want to get your comments on this. Let's listen to some of this that came from a conference call.
You know, we have become one of the most bureaucratic, confusing, litigious societies on the planet. It's almost an embarrassment being an American citizen traveling around the world and listening to the stupid shit we have to deal with in this country. And, you know, at one point, we all have to get our act together or we won't do what we're supposed to do for the average Americans.
Jamie Dimon, not always known for having a filter.
Right.
Were you surprised that he made these comments, and why now?
Well, so I'm not surprised that Jamie Dimon gave such a boisterous press conference, but if I can just set the scene a little bit. So he just came back from a tour. He went to Israel, Ireland, a couple other countries. But so this is a conference call where JP Morgan is supposed to talk about its earnings as a company. And they just had the best 12 months in the company's history. So you'd think that the CEO would come in and give this really optimistic press conference, say, hey, investors, look at how well we did. Instead, he even lambasted the media saying, why are you concentrating on our business? You shouldn't be reporting on JP Morgan. You should be reporting on this awful situation that the U.S. is in right now. So he basically said infrastructure spending isn't good. Our tax code is complicated. You use some colorful language to describe as much. And this is in the face of JP Morgan having such a great quarter. So very, very passionate response from the CEO here.
That's why I was surprised, because they were doing so well. We saw this Trump bump, and then all of a sudden we're hearing a lot of negativity coming from Wall Street. Why is that?
Yes, well, certainly in the banking sector in itself, where, of course, JP Morgan, Jamie Dimon makes his money from. So a lot of the gains we saw from banks, the so-called Trump bump, was because people assumed we'd have deregulation. Healthcare hasn't gotten passed, and there's come out of Washington saying we need to repeal and replace the ACA before we can move on to tax cuts, before we can move on to deregulation. So there's a sense now that perhaps banks didn't deserve the gains that they had seen right after the election. So that certainly is hitting JP Morgan, it's hitting Citigroup. They all reported earnings on Friday. All of them fell, even though you did have JP Morgan, for example, posting a great quarter. And what's more, I mean, Jamie Dimon didn't go as far as to say that he blames the White House for this. I mean, he, after all, is on their business council. But he essentially said that the gridlock in Washington doesn't make a difference just because existing policies are already so bad. And I love this one moment on the call. One of the reporters asked, "Oh, are you frustrated right now with the Trump administration?" And he said, "No, I'm frustrated with you, reporters."
Back on the media.
Exactly. So a little bit of the same sort of dialogue that we've heard out of the White House.
I'm curious, Dani, we know there's been a lot of coverage on Russia's interference in U.S. elections. Is that having an impact in the business world?
Right. So I would break it up into two sort of Main Street and Wall Street. So on Wall Street, for example, the day that Donald Trump Jr. tweeted out his emails, it was quite remarkable to watch the S&P 500. Lately, it has really not been responding to anything in geopolitics, just because there are a lot of other things going on. People are watching
what was the
straight drop down. I mean, it was very dramatic. Now, by the end of the day, the gains did come back up, and it ended basically unchanged. But I think it's pretty significant, even though it was not lasting. It shows that people care. People are paying attention. And perhaps they didn't last. The people I spoke to said that, you know, we don't have anything concrete yet. We're not totally sure how this is going to end up. But just the matter of fact that he could set off those email stocks so quickly means that if we do get more out of this Russian investigation, then watch out.
Dani Burger, thank you so much for joining us.